Oh, what's going on, everybody? It's Adrian Hunter from over here at Headbuzz Hookah. Just a little spoiler alert before we get too deep into this review of ugly guava. That's what we're reviewing today. I've got it packed up in a HJ Retro Harmony with 4 Narian cubes on top. Normally this is exactly as much heat as I like to put on my ugly, but this Retro Harmony is really thin compared to the Alpaca Rooks that I've been using. So it heated up pretty quick, and I always start my bowls a little bit before I start the review. And I got a little bit of a head buzz going, which is weird for the modern take on ugly hookah tobacco. More on that later. But before we get into all that, let's get into the meat and potatoes of our reviews that we do over here at PipeDreamHookah. We're going to do the scent, the flavor profile, and the clouds, and as usual, we're going to start with how does ugly guava smell? Okay, so if you've ever had a guava flavor before, you already know what to expect from most of these. This is going to smell like what I think a natural guava hookah tobacco should smell like. If you ever smell the guava, I don't think they smell as strong as the tobaccos do, because obviously they kind of get the essence of the flavor going when they make these shisha tobaccos. But yeah, it smells like a pretty bright guava. Nothing really insane to talk about when it comes to the scent of the tobacco. What I can really tell you is I think they nailed the guava part in the head, at least from what we can tell from the scent. Before we go deeper into how the tobacco smells and tastes, let's look at the clouds. Look at that! The ugly hookah tobacco produces clouds. Now, I've said this in past ugly videos. I feel like I should reiterate it here. Ugly did have a bad batch a couple months back, and it wasn't producing any clouds, and the flavors were lackluster. I can tell you, I can promise you, that the current batch of ugly produces awesome clouds, as you can see. It might have something to do with this Thunder Pro hose, but that's besides the point. The clouds are great. Most of your shisha tobacco clouds should be good. This day and age, most of the tobaccos produce good clouds. It comes down to that glycerin, honey, molasses mixture, or whatever they're using to kind of bind the shisha tobacco. That's where most of your clouds are going to come from, and I think most people pretty much have it down at this point. So let's move on to the most important thing when we're critically analyzing any shisha tobacco. That's going to be the flavor profile. We're going to do it on both the inhale and the exhale, because I find that they differ just a little bit. Let's start with the inhale. Well, I've said it before, and I'll just go ahead and say it again. Ugly does an awesome job of translating the scent of the tobacco into the flavor profile of the tobacco. And when it comes to this stuff, at least on the inhale, it tastes exactly like it smells. It's going to be this bright, kind of a natural guava flavor. If you've ever had a guava, it's a really interesting kind of a fruit flavor. It's unlike most fruits that most people eat on an everyday basis. It's not necessarily super sweet, and it's not really bitter either. It kind of falls in this own weird little area of being kind of a almost savory fruit. I guess is the best way I could say it if you've never had a guava. If you haven't had a guava before, it's going to be really hard to explain the flavor of a guava, so either maybe try guava or go pick up some like Alfacama guava or Alfaca guava. Those are really good places to start for guava flavors. Let's move on to the exhale. Okay, so the exhale actually provides a pretty good counterpoint for the flavor profile on the inhale. On the inhale, the flavor profile is very rich. It's pretty saturated with that strong guava flavor, and there's really nothing else going on. There's no mint in here or anything. It's not like some of the brands that are around, maybe say a Brazilian brand, that kind of just stuffs menthol or mint into whatever they're making. That's not going to be the case here. So the exhale, instead of being this super potent guava, it's this really nice airy guava. Really, it's just the flavor profile coming down from like a 95 to like a 65. It's pretty common in most shisha tobaccos. It's just something to be aware of. If you're thinking about picking this stuff up, that might be a little bit too deep for some people, but that's how we do it over here on PipeDreamHookah. Now, before I go into rating this stuff for you, just a few things to keep in mind about ugly hookah tobacco. Back in the day, everyone talked about what a great head buzz they provided because it was like this unwashed leaf and it was a high nicotine content. Now, this is still higher nicotine than most other hookah tobaccos, but it's not like it was way back in the day. Unless you're going to pack on like a ton of heat, you're not really gonna get into the head buzz. I packed on a ton of heat and I've got a bit of a head buzz going, but I feel like most people don't do 4 cubes. Just know that if you want to do 4 cubes on something the size of, say, a HJ Harmony bowl, you can absolutely get away with that. And then obviously flavor, accuracy, and potency are on. And as far as longevity goes, this stuff, 2 rounds of cubes, no problem. It's going to hold the flavor profile. It's one of the best blondes around when it comes to actually retaining the flavor profile for like a full hour and a half to 2 hours. All that said, I'm going to go ahead and rate this tobacco at a solid 6 out of 7. The reason it's not really creeping up into the like full 7 out of 7 score is because while it is a super solid guava flavor, Ugly makes a pretty good quality tobacco. It's just, for one, it's not really my preference. I'm not super into guava flavors, so there is a little bit of bias in there. So if you're really into guava flavors, it's like one of your favorite flavor profiles, you might even be able to bump it up into a 7. And it's obviously not going to dip below that 6 out of 7 area because it performs very well. Ugly, to me, they've redeemed themselves. Jim's done a great job on this batch. Everything's good as long as he keeps cranking out batches like this one. I think he's going to be in a really good spot. Now, recording this has been a bit of a mess. I've had some camera issues, so hopefully it's not too long. A lot of these cuts, you guys don't see it, but I've actually had to like set up the camera again and stuff. Something weird's going on with the viewfinder. I have no clue. Hopefully I didn't keep you here too long. Before I go, I guess I'll make a tiny plug. The AM Hookah podcast, you know, that podcast that myself and Matt Desind from over at the Matt Desind YouTube channel, he does reviews just like I do. We have this podcast and we're finishing up season 1 and season 2 is coming up in like about a month and a half. So if you haven't caught any of our stuff, maybe go check out the AM Hookah podcast. I'll leave a link in the description, and we just talk about hookah stuff. We do it live, so there's a lot of audience interaction and stuff like that. We also got merch, link in the description for that as well. Anyway, that's gonna do it for this episode of the PipeDreamHookah Hookah Reviews. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, happy smoking.